2006. The International Astronomical Union made a decision by a show of hands. Pluto stopped being a planet and went on to become a dwarf planet. A social disenchantment unheard of in the history of astronomy broke out. Why the hell was Pluto no longer a planet? Had it been taken away from us by an evil decision of astronomers? Or was there a compelling reason? The answer is it doesn't make any difference. The issue of Pluto and its status was a huge exaggeration that makes us wonder to what extent society can alter the way science works. To understand it, though, we must go back to the start, to the very discovery of this small celestial body. At the beginning of the 20th century, our solar system consisted of 8 planets. As we discussed in another video, Neptune was the last to join that list thanks to Leverrier's theoretical prediction. The Frenchman noticed that the orbit of Uranus didn't quite fit with what the solar system models seemed to indicate. So he assumed there was a new planet beyond Uranus that was pulling on it and that was changing its orbit. Based on observations, Leverrier theorized what this new planet should look like and where it should be located so that everything fell into place. And this is how the planet Neptune was discovered, by looking in the predicted patch of the sky. Leverrier became a legend, and the rest is history. However, over the decades, people realized that something didn't add up. There were still small differences between the theoretical prediction for the orbits of Uranus and Neptune and what was actually observed in the sky. These discrepancies led the American Percival Lowell to pull a Leverrier. In 1905, he proposed the existence of a 9th planet whose gravity would be modifying the orbits of Uranus and Neptune just the same as before. He called that body Planet X, and it should be about 10 times more massive than the Earth. Lowell provided a specific location where it was to be found, but the search proved to be unsuccessful. It was not until 25 years later that Clyde William Tombaugh, while working at the Lowell Observatory in Arizona, detected an object that was within 6 degrees of Lowell's predicted position. He didn't hesitate. There it was, the Planet X they had been seeking for so many years. The news spread like wildfire. The first planet detected from the United States. The observatory had to decide on a name for the planet, and among the thousands of suggestions received, they chose Pluto, a name proposed by a girl who was barely 11. Oh. That same year, the Walt Disney Company called its most famous character's dog Pluto. Hi there, Mickey. As you can see, Americans were very, very proud, and they weren't going to let Pluto go too easily. However, despite its popularity, the discovery of Pluto and its status as a planet was never without controversy among the scientific community. Its search was clearly motivated by Lowell's prediction, but its finding looked more like a stroke of luck rather than the result of calculations. Neptune was found a few months after its prediction and within 1 degree of the expected location, unlike Pluto, even if the latter benefited from almost 100 more years of technical progress. In addition, Pluto was not blue-green in color, like its neighbors Uranus and Neptune, but rather appeared to be yellowish, more like the rocky planets. To make matters worse, the new planet seemed to be about the same size as Mars, much smaller than expected, and clearly not big enough to alter the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. And there were 2 other things that bothered astronomers. Pluto's orbit was tilted 17 degrees relative to the orbital plane of the other planets, and 1/3 of its orbit was closer to the Sun than Neptune. Pluto was an oddball. However, despite the uncertainties, the people had spoken. Pluto became the 9th planet in the solar system. It was not until 1978 that the discovery of Charon, Pluto's first moon, rekindled the debate. Other planets in the solar system also had their own satellites, so the existence of Charon seemed to be a point in Pluto's favor. But far from helping, Charon ushered in Pluto's decline. By measuring the satellite's orbit, the mass of the planet could be accurately determined, and it turned out to be even smaller than previously estimated. Pluto was tinier than our own moon. Moreover, in the late 1980s, the Voyager 2 spacecraft passed close enough to Neptune to accurately measure its mass. The new data revealed that the orbits of Uranus and Neptune could be explained without the need for any extra planets. The discrepancies that led Lowell to postulate his Planet X theory no longer existed. On top of that came the discovery of other Plutos. Astronomers began to suspect the possible existence of a new asteroid belt beyond Neptune's orbit, which they called the Kuiper Belt. And then, in 1992, the first trans-Neptunian object was detected, or maybe the second if you count Pluto. Barely 7 years later, more than 100 objects were already known to populate this region. Although all of them were smaller than Pluto, it was only a matter of time before a larger one appeared. And that's what happened in 2005 with the discovery of Eris, about 30% more massive than Pluto. The rate at which the number of new solar system objects was growing and the need to classify them further inflamed the debate. If Pluto remained a planet, did we also have to accept all the rest? The controversy brought to light a more interesting question. What really is a planet? Why do we call Mercury a planet but refer to Vesta as an asteroid? The lack of a clear definition of a planet was raising some doubts among scientists. That is why, in 1999, the International Astronomical Union established a working group to define the properties any planet should have. It looked like the issue of Pluto's identity was about to be settled when, boom, the only decision adopted was to set a boundary between planets and brown dwarfs. If you manage to fuse deuterium, you're a brown dwarf. Otherwise, you're a planet. Such an upper boundary was great, but what about the lower one? The committee pointed out that it was outside their scope. They just kept out of it, and Pluto's case was still up in the air. In view of the success, in 2004, the International Astronomical Union launched a new working group to solve this. Over the next 2 years, different arguments were debated without any agreement being reached. Half of the members of the working group considered that Pluto should be demoted from its planetary status, while the other half felt it would be a mistake. Since they were unable to reach a consensus, yet another committee was created. The main problem was those debates were focused not so much on the definition of a planet as on deciding what to do with Pluto. If they said no, they would piss off a lot of people. The emotional component and the social debate were preventing the drawing of a clear dividing line, one that was strictly scientific and not culturally based. All in all, the first proposal of the International Astronomical Union to define a planet rested on 2 conditions. First, it had to be an object orbiting our star, the Sun. In this way, the Moon or other objects outside the solar system should not be classified as planets. And second, the body had to satisfy the condition of hydrostatic equilibrium. In other words, it had to be round. This definition of a planet works more or less satisfactorily from a scientific point of view, although there may be doubts about the roundness of some objects. And since Pluto meets both conditions, it would indeed be called a planet, as would Eris, Ceres, and about 40 much smaller objects from the Kuiper Belt. Therefore, our solar system would go from featuring 9 planets to having more than 50. Scientifically, it's not a big deal. If an object fits the definition, it becomes part of it. But what about society? Learning the names of the 9 planets in the solar system is not that hard, but 50? This definition separated the scientific world from society. To tackle the problem, the International Astronomical Union suggested accepting only 12 planets in the solar system, the 8 familiar planets along with Pluto, Charon, Eris, and Ceres. But this was in contradiction to the previous definition. Realizing they had made an even bigger mess, the Union decided to add one more condition to their definition of a planet. The vicinity around its orbit has to be cleared of other objects. For instance, there are a lot of asteroids hanging around Ceres' orbit. It doesn't have enough gravity to destabilize their orbits and clear all its surroundings. Astronomers approved this definition of a planet in 2006. The new official definition left out Pluto, which was now considered a dwarf planet, and the Americans were left with 0 planets discovered by them. Pluto's downgrade immediately hit the headlines. The California State Assembly condemned the decision, even calling it mean-spirited for stripping Pluto of its planetary status while ignoring the impact on the state's long-term fiscal health or the psychological harm to some Californians, including children who would have to redraw their refrigerator art projects. On the other hand, the state legislature of New Mexico, the birthplace of the astronomer who discovered Pluto, was also against the decision and declared March 13th Pluto Day. Interestingly, this was not the first time astronomers had changed the status of a planet. In 1801, the astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi discovered Ceres, a celestial body floating between Mars and Jupiter, and it became just another planet in the solar system. But soon more and more small bodies were detected in the same region, such as Pallas, Juno, or Vesta, making up the famous asteroid belt. That is when astronomers decided that Ceres should become an asteroid, and voila! Does this story sound familiar? Have you heard about the great debate on why Ceres is not a planet? No, because there never was one. As you can see, the social, emotional, and even marketing component seems to be responsible for all the fuss about Pluto. Today, almost 20 years after Pluto ceased to be a planet, there is almost no scientific debate left, although in 2015 we saw a reopening. The New Horizons mission showed an extremely interesting and geologically active Pluto, with mountains and a heart that captivated social networks. Pluto was taking revenge on us all. The head of the mission, Alan Stern, keeps insisting on the definition of Pluto. The poor guy launched a probe to a planet just to be told a few months later that it was no longer a planet. Stern and other scientists maintain that the definition of a planet should refer only to the properties of the object itself, not to those of its vicinity. We might even question whether Jupiter is a planet if we consider the tens of thousands of Trojan asteroids that follow it. Other astronomers argue that the International Astronomical Union is wrong in wanting to give a definition to everyone's liking, and that we should separate the cultural from the scientific, just as geologists do not try to find a scientific definition for the word continent. The truth is that this debate does not change the way in which we conduct research and make progress in astronomy. In fact, only 424 of the 2,412 people attending the Congress participated in the vote that left Pluto out. You can imagine how little they care about it. Regardless of whether we call it a planet or a dwarf planet, it is impossible to deny Pluto's importance in the history of astronomy. It was the first known object in the Kuiper Belt, the brightest one and the easiest to study. Its geology and atmosphere have allowed us to better understand the formation of the solar system. Pluto is an essential body of the solar system, and this controversy in no way diminishes its scientific significance, whether it's a planet or not. And remember, if you want more science, just hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.